from the Job TV News. I'm here with Jack Richardson and I'm Will Hoffenkamp, and we've got an interesting series for you tonight. If you've heard of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, I'm sure you've heard of the outcry that it's received in both the North and the South. To put it simply, the Kansas-Nebraska Act gives the territories recently garnered by the U.S. the right to vote for themselves on whether or not to have slavery. This is, I'm told, contradictory to the Missouri Compromise, which established the precedent of slavery in the South and freedom in the North. In the Louisiana Purchase, all states north of the line, save Missouri, were free states, and all below were slave. Now, over to our political analyst for a more in-depth analysis. Good evening, Jack. How are you today?
I'm good. And yourself?
Good. Can you tell us a little bit about the Kansas-Nebraska Act?
Sure thing, Will. So essentially, the Kansas-Nebraska Act was an attempt to appease both the North and the South during westward expansion. But it served only to rankle them both. The idea arose in Congress as a way to incentivize Southern representatives to allow Kansas into the Union. Senator Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois proposed a compromise which he believed would solve that. Kansas would instead be admitted as a slave state, and Nebraska would be admitted as a free.
And why would this cause such an uproar?
Well, Will, the location of Kansas would have previously rendered it a free state as per the Missouri Compromise. So, Northerners are upset that it has lost its freedom.
And why would it bother the South?
Well, the South saw the West as a region which slavery would flourish. They wanted the whole of the new territory to be legal for slavery. They regret the necessity of breaking the Union, but consider it their destiny. The North, however, thought that allowing slavery would cause a lack of jobs for free laborers.
And what does the Kansas-Nebraska Act put into effect in relation to slavery?
The main goal of the Kansas-Nebraska Act is to maintain the balance of free and slave states in the Union. To do this, the new states will hold a popular vote to decide whether or not slavery should be had in the state.
And we're going to be hearing from Jack again later in our segment when we discuss the growing tensions in our nation. And now for a short commercial break.
Oh, Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack. The prize we sought is woe. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting. While follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen and dead. Oh Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells. Rise up, for your flag is flung. For you the huge trills, 10, for you bouquets and ribbon wreaths, for you shores a crowding. For you they call, the swaying mass, their eager faces turning. Here, Captain, dear father, this arm beneath your head. It is some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead.
This and more in Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. By now.
Now we're going to kick it on over to sports.
A new sport, lacrosse, introduced to the common man by William George Beers, is taking foot. Here we will cut to some video of this sport being displayed by professionals.
Breaking news, everybody. We have received word on the territory of Kansas and some tragic occurrences.
Unfortunately, our viewing of lacrosse will not be continued at this time. We will be switching the program over to ESPN The Ocho.
Due to the issue we were just speaking about, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, some tension is occurring in the West. The territory of Kansas has elected a governor and a legislature. Due to this, the Constitution of Topeka decided to outlaw slavery.
And Will, this was very predictable because the only voters at the time were Jayhawkers. These people were all abolitionist men opposed to slavery. This anti-slavery atmosphere didn't last long.
Correct, Jack. This is because pro-slavery people had developed their own government. The people were called border ruffians and traveled across the border to Kansas. These people came over to vote illegally and ruined the concept of popular sovereignty. With these voters, over 4,500 people came to vote, compared to the 1,500 that were able to vote legally. This changed the Kansas legislation on slavery, and then the state became a slave state.
To further the slavery idea in the Kansas territory and make it concrete, the president affirmed these illegal settlers. On January 24, 1856, President Franklin Pierce took a side. He called the January 15th anti-slavery election a rebellion and committed himself to support the pro-slavery government. This was very, very problematic for the legal anti-slavery voters in the territory and became somewhat unjust. Now, I'm willing to bet that you, the viewer, could guess that something beneficial for pro-slavery is going to happen, and this is exactly what happens. The theme, for the most part, is a back and forth between the Kansas abolitionists, and the pro-slavery people.
Interesting ideas, Jack. Now the next move would be that the Southerners in the Senate voted to block this move, and the Congress dissolved without solving the issue, leaving the state a territory and no clear solution to the problem.
And no clear solution would occur in the near future. So many of these citizens living in Kansas had built up more tensions, and the issue of slavery made it uncomfortable to live in the territory.
This tension boiled over and many incidents of violence occurred. The first major battle was a band of 800 pro-slavery ruffians from Missouri, led by a sheriff. These men wrought havoc over the territory. They randomly arrested abolitionists, destroyed their printing presses, burned what was called the Free State Hotel, and went to and destroyed the home of the Free State leader Charles Robinson. All of this occurred in the town of Lawrence.
But the abolitionists wouldn't let that attack stand. A man named John Brown led a retaliation.
Yes, he led a small party of men over to Pottawatomie Creek. These men killed 5 people associated with the pro-slavery Law and Order Party. He also defeated a small force of Missourians at Blackjack. In retaliation, Missourians burned and pillaged the city of Osawatomie.
This was almost the extent of the skirmishes, because John W. Geary, the governor of the territory, got a truce between sides before the elections of November 1856. However, the violence resumed thereafter.
In the end, the anti-slavery group regained power, but not after the loss of so many lives.
Now, to get a more in-depth position on Bleeding Kansas, we'll interview a Northerner.
Alright, thanks.
Well, Will, I'm a little parched, actually. Thank you. Against this territory, thus fortunate in position and population, a crime has been committed, which, without example in the records of the past, not in plundered provinces or in the cruelties of selfish governors will you find its parallel. Yet there is an ancient instance which may show at least the path of justice. The terrible impeachment by which the Roman orator has blasted through all time in the name of Verres, amidst charges of robbery and sacrilege. The enormity which most aroused the indignant voice of his accuser, and which still stands forth with the strongest distinctions, arresting the sympathetic indignation of all who read the story, is that away in Sicily he had scourged the citizen of Rome.
Mr. Sumner, I have no idea what that means, but please, continue.
Sir, speaking in an age of light and in a land of constitutional liberty, where the safeguards of elections are justly placed among the highest triumphs of civilization, I can earnestly assert that the wrongs of much abused Sicily, thus memorable in history, were small by the side of the wrongs of Kansas, where the very shrines of popular institutions, more sacred than any heathen altar, have been desecrated, where the ballot book, more precious than any work in ivory or marble, from the cunning hand of art, has been plundered, and where the cry, "I am an American citizen," has been interposed in vain against outrage of every kind, even upon life itself.
Mr. Sumner, now we cut back to your provocative words which landed you in this situation.
The senator from South Carolina, Mr. Butler, has read many books of chivalry, and believes himself to be a chivalrous knight with many sentiments of honor and courage. Of course he has chosen a mistress to whom he has made his vows, and who, though ugly to others, is always lovely to him. Though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste in his sight. I mean the harlot slavery. For her, his tongue is always profuse in words. Let her be impeached in character, or any proposition made to shut her out from the extension of her wantonness. And no extravagance of manner or hardihood of assertion is then too great for this senator.
Stop. And now back in the studio for a jiffy. That is the end of our interview with the Northerner.
And now we're going to have an interview with the Southern plantation owner.
Hi, I'm Jack Richardson, here in the South with plantation owner Robert Sickle. Now, in the wake of Bleeding Kansas, how do you, a Southern slave owner, feel about the events that transpired?
Well, I'm peeved. I support popular sovereignty, and we won through popular sovereignty. The Northerners, they had to go and get violent. They started this bleeding Kansas. I'm very angry.
Now, do you feel there is any way to create peace after this bloody battle start, or is there more conflict to come?
I personally find it unforgivable. The Northerners, they use violence and they act like barbarians. Well, I personally think that we cannot have peace until slavery ceases to be attacked.
Now, sir, I have some additional information. It says here, William and Drury Doyle had repeatedly been stabbed, and their skulls had been smashed open. In addition, Drury's arm had been severed from his body, and his fingers had been hacked into bloody bits. The goriness of this scene seems fictional. Does this change anything in your views?
Yes, this is horrific. There's no possible reconciliation here. They call us brutal, and then they slaughter us like pigs.
Now, of course, I'm not condoning at all what happened in Pottawatomie Creek, but John Brown was enraged by the ransacking of Lawrence. This was done by your fellow pro-slavery people. Could it not be said that the first strike was by Southerners?
With all due respect, sir, that is a foolish question. Sure, Southerners acted out of spite and were involved in this so-called ransacking. Bloody murder is not one of their crimes. John Brown and others involved are no way justified. They should be imprisoned for their crimes.
But what about all the slave lives ended by masters in the South? The number of slaves killed must greatly outnumber this massacre. Once again, I do not condone the massacre, but you act as though there was no equivalent horrific actions that occurs on the Southerners' end.
I do not see your points as valid. I cannot agree with that. I do not see where the North has come up with these ideas. These slaves are our property. They have value. And to be taken away would be to steal our property and our livelihood. If the North continues in its blind crusades and slavery, I cannot see any alternative to battle.
And that's all, folks. More news from Jog TV to come. Now we have...